Welcome back to the DANCNG SOBR podcast. Really happy that you continue to join us here. I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Movita Juice Bar. Please go to movitajuicebar.com to order, or you can also go to your food apps. Just remember that they also have protein shakes and like green stuff shakes that are really good for you and healthy. And you can go to their website and get some of that stuff too, or you can visit them in person if you find their locations. I want to tell you that I've been doing this for a little while now, and I have to figure out a way to monetize this. But in the meantime, if you visit shoprafa.com, everything that you buy helps to support this podcast. Or you can go directly to Venmo and look up Rafa-LA and send us something through Venmo. Anything you send does help. I'm starting something new this week also. I'm calling it a small business shout out. And this week's small business is Tu Voz LA. Tu Voz LA is a graphic design company that a friend of mine runs. And so I just decided to let them be the first ones that we shout out. If you have a small business or you know somebody who you would like for me to shout out, please hit me up in the DMs on Instagram. So Tu Voz is a graphic design company, and it says here that they do everything from print marketing design to social media strategy design. Tu Voz is there to help, so check out their Instagram at tuvoz-LA. Thank you, Tu Voz, for working for our peeps. Also, I just had a tooth pulled today, so I am going to be hiding behind this microphone, doing my best Howard Stern impression, just hiding behind the microphone the whole time. And yeah, there's a big gap right in the bottom, so right in the middle. So I'm going to be right behind this microphone the whole time, just so you know that that's why I'm doing it. We have today the graceful presence of Betty Avila, the director at Self-Help Graphics. Let's get into it. And here we are in the presence of Grace.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, Betty Avila.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much for the invite.
Thank you so much for coming. It has started to get a little more difficult to find people sometimes, and when someone like you agrees to come on, like an instant yes, and it's really, really cool to So I'm not saying that the reason that why we had you is because we couldn't find anybody.
Yeah, because it kind of sounds like that a little bit.
No, that's not it at all. Because I asked you from the beginning, but I did want to wait a little while to have you on.
Sure.
I did want to have some episodes, in the bank before I brought you on.
Cool.
Really excited to have you here. Really,
I'm happy to be here. Yeah.
Estás
I
en tu
love
casa.
chatting with you.
Yeah. We have had quite a few talks, like long talks, just talking about Los Angeles and the life. So let's start a little bit. I just love to start with all my guests a little bit about like where you grew up. And well, first of all, Betty Avila is the executive director of Self-Help Graphics and Art, and we will get into that in a bit. Yeah. And but let's find out a little bit about where you grew up.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cypress Park in Northeast LA, but kind of have done the rotation throughout the General East Side. Went to middle school in elementary in Highland Park, middle school in El Sereno, high school in Boyle Heights. So I feel like the Northeast and General East Side is part of my home orientation. Mm-hmm. And went to Bravo High School, still up in Boyle Heights. But yeah, Cypress Park was always like an unknown neighborhood. I always had to orient people like, oh, it's, just past Chinatown and Lincoln Heights, or like before you hit Highland Park on the 110. It's crazy now to have it be much more recognizable.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those neighborhoods that's between the destinations of the past.
Yes, totally.
You're usually going to Eagle Rock or to Highland Park, but there's
or even like Glassell Park. Yeah. But all those neighborhoods I feel like are much more known now as that whole area is gentrifying. Yeah.
I think it's also as we grow up, we know more cities, because when we were little, we just I just knew East LA, I didn't even know like the dividing smaller communities,
Totally.
So, yeah, definitely like as a kid, we just need little tiny streets.
Totally. I actually, my first days in college at Pitzer College in Claremont, Obviously, all these people from all over the country have no idea what Cypress Park is. So I would say, oh, I'm from East LA.
Yeah.
And at some point, I met one of my dear friends, Randy Gomez, and I told him I'm from East LA, and he was like, but what street? And then I was like, oh, shit. And so I got called out by a real East LA resident. But I've learned how to navigate the geographic description of where I'm from.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And what middle school did you go to in
El Sereno?
El Sereno Middle School? Oh, no way. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. And then right over to Bravo.
Right over the hill, yeah.
And I think that most of the people that I know from Bravo, most of the people that I knew are like pretty awesome people, to be honest. Like they're all like, but I mean, also like something a little weird about them. Not that
quirky.
Quirky, yeah. I think that's the word better. Yeah, there's always like
Yeah, well, it wasn't like a traditional high school experience at all.
And it was one of the first schools that did that. Like went out of the norm and started teaching in different little smaller communities and things like that, right?
Totally, yeah.
So it was a magnet school.
Magnet school. Everybody was
focused
bused
on
in.
medical stuff.
There were some folks from actually the neighborhood, but like the majority of the student population is bused in from all over the city. So I think at least at the time, the character of the school was really quite diverse. And yeah, it's not structured like a typical campus. This one huge building. There's no like football team, like there was a cheer squad, but it was sort of unclear, like,
what are they
were like
for?
representing the school.
Yay, science.
And it was focused on science. And I remember people being like, oh, you're going to be a doctor. And I'm like, no.
Yeah,
no,
because anybody that went to Bravo was, in the eyes of everybody in the hood, was like, oh, you're going to be a doctor because your school's over there by the hospital, right? Yeah.
No,
so
none of that. I mean, I'm sure there's a smattering of folks that have gone on to that, but
you also had the coolest, one of the coolest murals right in front of your school, right?
Yes, yeah. There's a Boteo mural.
Yeah.
They're outside of the campus. It
has to do with sciences, I remember.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a beautiful one. Yeah.
It is.
And how was it being, I guess, from Cypress Park and then going to a school that was pretty mixed, right?
For high school, you mean?
Yeah.
It was totally part of my orientation, because my bus in El Sereno would stop at Bravo to pick up high school students to drop off. So it was always just part of my world. Didn't feel, too crazy. It was like, obviously
it wasn't too far and it didn't feel too different. Yeah. And then you went to Pitzer.
And then I went to Pitzer.
Does anybody know where Pitzer is? Or who is Pitzer?
So Pitzer College is one of the 5 Claremont undergraduate campuses, and it's sort of touted as like the Ivies of the West, and in Claremont, like the street names are even named after Ivy League schools. So yeah, it is the youngest of the schools there, the 5 schools. It's also they all have their own sort of identities, and that's the super hippie, like social justice, radical revolutionary campus. It's changed a lot. I think the last time I was there, it felt like I was at Coachella. So I don't know like what's the reputation now, but I think at the time I went, it was definitely that, like the granola campus of the 5.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I find it like crazy that your major was English literature.
It was, yeah. I double majored English and world literature and Spanish literature.
How did that happen? I mean, not how did that happen, but I mean, I also like love literature, and
sure.
I wonder how you were like, oh, I'm gonna be an English major, and then ended up switching to your master's was management,
in arts management.
Arts management, yeah, at Claremont.
At Claremont Graduate University.
So BA in English literature, and then master's, MFA, MBA, MBA in administration. It
was definitely, I think for me going to Pitzer, where, I'm not knocking on Pitzer at all. I love that school so much, but like, I was a humanities kid, like liberal arts, my jam, science and math, no. Like, I feel so smart in like the humanities side. If you put me on the other side, I'm such a dud. So, and Pitzer had that focus. My math class was called Math in Many Cultures.
What?
Yeah. And it checked off my math requirement. So
Math in Many Cultures?
Math in Many Cultures.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
it was super cool.
How did they cover that? Or
it was actually taught by a mathematician, but she actually took you through different cultural orientations with math. It was super fascinating. But again, not like a
of course.
strictly mathematics kind of focus class.
Just kind
it
of
was like culture. It was actually culture and history
kind of
through
like
a math lens.
how the Mayans had the
that was
number
actually
system
my final project was on that,
Oh,
on the
okay.
Mayans and math. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. But so for me, being there, it was an opportunity to just explore what I liked. An 18-year-old Betty taking on all these student loans, like had no sense of, I was like, I'm just going to do what I love. Fuck it. Like, I'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
To this day, I have family who think I'm a teacher. So
Maybe it's the glasses, right?
maybe, but I figured let me like just kind of try things out, and literature, that was just my world. It was my passion.
So before we go on to the rest, what was your favorite book that you studied while you were there?
So I had already read it, but I revisited Dante's Inferno. But we read, the class actually went through the full Divine Comedy, and was just like, if I look back and like when I make payments on my student loans and I'm like, fuck yeah, that class.
It was worth everything.
It was so worth it.
That's awesome. And to have great instructors too, it has to.
Yeah. Oh, that like instructor was even gothy. Like, she was like an older, vampy looking senora. I was like, I love this.
Like Anne Rice.
Totally.
Teaching Dante's Inferno. That's I haven't even approached like thinking of reading that. I like modern literature, but I have read some classics.
It's hard, and you like definitely need like the companion reader to walk you through like what this means and what it refers to. But I've had this obsession with Dante's Inferno from when I was in 8th grade.
Wow.
I was introduced to it by my 8th grade teacher. What up, Miss Kelly? Who, I was like, wait a minute, this guy wrote like a trash talking book where he put all of his enemies in hell and punished them. Like, this is brilliant.
Punk rock Betty.
Yeah, I loved it. I loved it. And from that time frame, I mean, I even look back at my thesis, which was for my Spanish literature degree, and I'm like, who wrote that? Like, hello. I was amazing back then. I couldn't write for shit like that anymore. Yeah. So it's nice to have had that period of just like doing what I loved.
Revisiting those books, I'm sure, will spark those writing things.
I'm
again.
sure.
Anytime you read something like that, you just want to put words down on paper and like, add some of that stuff to it.
For sure.
So you ended up then, after Pitzer, going to Montclair and getting your...
To Claremont Graduate University,
I'm sorry. That's so weird that they're right next to each other. Montclair and Claremont. And
it's very
neighbor
confusing.
cities.
It's just different counties.
Yeah. So, and then after that, your first nonprofit gig.
My first nonprofit gig. Well, I'm gonna back it up.
Okay. Yeah.
I spent a year in Korea after college, so that was an experience.
I was gonna add into that because I didn't know exactly where that landed, but that's because you're a Fulbright Scholar, right?
I am, yes.
And is that part of or whatever you get from being a Fulbright Scholar? Go ahead and tell us about it.
Yeah, so the Fulbright program is essentially a program that sends Americans out into other countries to either do a research project, or a lot of them are English teaching programs, which is what I went into. But it's a very prestigious program. It's hard to get, and so the thing is, when I got it, the teacher, or the professor rather, who like walked all of the students that were applying through it, he was like, if you ever get this, like, this is what you want to have in your eulogy. you were a Fulbright scholar. And it's interesting because that time like feels very far away, but like when I've talked to people or people read my bio or whatever, they're like, oh, Fulbright. And I'm like, yeah, it was but that was I did teach in Korea. I tried that, and I
English.
learned it was not for me at all. Yeah.
So you taught English?
I taught English,
to Korean-speaking
to
kids?
Korean middle schoolers.
Middle schools, okay.
At a Buddhist middle school.
Wow.
Yeah. And basically I learned middle schoolers are little shits in every country, all of the countries at that age. Like that's a tough age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
And you were like 20 something?
I would have been 21, 22 maybe.
Wow.
22, yeah. I was 22.
And still at the age where a kid like that or kids like that would completely like
it's jarring and jolting, and I think it helped that I didn't speak Korean because I didn't know like when they were talking shit about me. But there were some really amazing students,
of course,
and
always.
there's always like the rad students, and I loved the experience. I loved learning about just a totally different culture in a very homogenous place. Like the U.S. is so diverse. Korea is one of the most homogenous countries in the world.
Wow.
So here the notion of other is very complicated and layered, and over there it's like you are either Korean or you are not. And navigating that I think was interesting. Also would get confused for being like half Korean. I would have people ask like, are you sure you're not half Korean? But yeah, my parents are from the pinche rancho in Mexico.
They wanted you on their team.
They did.
Yeah.
I mean, I was happy to join.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
21 years old, out there teaching English.
Yeah.
Wow. And so you get the Fulbright Scholar, you come back to the U.S.
Yeah.
And that's when you apply for your master's.
I did, yeah. And so I had, during my undergrad years, had done the internship at the Getty, which had exposed me to just that world of art and administration.
So we didn't bring that up yet, but the Getty Marrow internship, right?
Correct.
So that was when you came back from Korea. How did they find you, or did you apply for it, or how?
So that internship was before. That was an undergrad.
Okay.
And so I did it the summer before my senior year.
Oh, okay.
And I interned at the Getty Research Institute. The program itself, you can intern at the Getty campus, one of the two, or they do internships all over the county.
So for young people, for the youth out there, or anybody, just starting off in college that is looking for something in the arts, how do they apply for something like the Getty internship?
It's every year. It comes out. If you're interested in interning on site, that cycle is earlier in the year. I want to say it's like maybe March. And then if you're just interested in general, like arts internships, paid, of course, those will come out later in the year, like April or May. And then, so you apply directly to those organizations, but it'll be clear, like this is a Getty funded internship program. And that was a big deal for me because I couldn't afford to take an unpaid summer. Like I had a lot of friends who could do that, and who had interned at amazing places for free. But yeah, for me, it was like, oh, I can like learn something interesting and new and like be okay in terms of my bills. Awesome, I'll do it. And so that program is now coming up on 30 years old, and they've actually managed to understand the impact of the program itself.
You were in the first
no, dude.
group?
I know people who were there. we know people who were in the first cohort.
Okay.
No, I wasn't. I was well into whatever, like 15 years probably.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My math is no bueno.
Yeah. The program was actually prompted by the 92 riots.
Oh, no way.
And so it was kind of like, whoa, there's like some serious racial tensions here in the city. How do we address this, through the work in the arts and museum settings?
I mean, it's crazy too that a lot of times it takes that to, because the BLM movement also like pushed so many new programs and so many people got work because of it.
Yeah.
And not that they weren't qualified before, but because of the BLM movement and was the word they called it, the reckoning or the social reckoning?
Yeah, the racial reckoning.
Racial reckoning.
Yeah.
because of that, like, a lot of companies opened up their doors to people that normally wouldn't.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it is crazy that something like that happens.
Yeah, these massive
only
moments.
Because
and
somebody's
that
shaking the
have
cage.
somehow, yeah, and it's sad that it takes like tragedy essentially to spark that, for sure.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So now you're the Getty intern, Montclair, and so I'm guessing now that's what got you. I'm trying to get to like why. How did you choose like
this
nonprofit arts?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm assuming you could have done a ton of different things. You could have been a doctor.
I could have been a doctor.
You could have written novels or helped publish novels. You could have, I'm sure there was a lot of other things you could do. And why did you choose arts? Was it because of the Getty internship?
I think that was a huge chunk of it, right? I think that exposure and that understanding of like, oh, this is a job. I can do this and get paid for it. And I really enjoy it. I think that what brought me even to apply for the internship and my sort of understanding of my place in art and culture at that time was sort of two things. One, leaving Northeast LA and the general East Side. And being in a place of like extreme privilege, like the kind of wealth that I was around in undergrad was pretty jarring. And this like feeling of catching up and not being, like constantly having to remind myself like, yes, I'm supposed to be here. And so something that I didn't realize would happen until I left and was in that space was I didn't have the sort of visual landscape reflecting me anymore. Whether that's the businesses and I've written about this and I've talked about it a lot, the murals that like I think I took for granted growing up around them. I was like, oh, of course the world is like this. And I'm always going to see myself on these walls. And all of a sudden I didn't, although there are some Boteo murals at Pitzer's campus. And so I like found myself searching for that again. I'm like, how do I find these like anchor points that ground me? And then at the same time, I have a teenage brother who's really into graffiti and is being told, this is wrong, this is illegal, you're a criminal. And I was trying to navigate with him, like, no, you're an artist. And like, let me take you into these spaces where what you do is valued and seen as important cultural expression. And so all of those things then tie together with my experience at the Getty. And what was really interesting about that summer is my wonderful supervisor at the time, who's still my friend, Katya, she was like, this girl from the East Coast, she had degrees from Harvard and Yale. And she's like, take me like to your place, take me to the East Side, show me the East Side. And I did, and I actually took her to Self-Help Graphics. And I had been to Self-Help for events like outside. I hadn't actually been into the gallery space inside the building. And so that day we went and we like knock on the door, and I got to show her. I was like, yeah, this is Self-Help. And even with this very sort of limited experience with the organization, I still felt like, yeah, this is a space for me. And then we walked in and I was like, whoa. Relative to like literally coming off the hill where the Getty is and this like massive white cultural palace, literally white, to then this space where like I don't need to know who the artist is to feel like this speaks to me. And so I think at that point I was like I was on a clear trajectory to figure out how to work there. How do I find myself in that space and taking what I'm learning at this cultural palace in Brentwood, and really
palace.
It is. It is. But like, how do I get myself more to this community that I love and care about so much? And so that I don't think I realized that at the time, but that's ultimately what happened. Yeah. So when I came back from Korea, I was like, okay, what do I have to do to get these types of jobs? Also came back in 2009, right after the like recession. And so, in the middle of the recession, I should say. So it was a little bit like I didn't have an option. I had to go to grad school. Like that was it. So I did. And that's got me on the path.
So that's kind of when you chose art and nonprofit. And so how did you end up at your first nonprofit gig, which was City Lights, right?
So
I'm trying to put all this together because
yeah.
the first time that I saw you, I was photographing an event and you were running the
I was
event.
emceeing.
You were emceeing at La Fonda.
Yeah, totally.
Over by MacArthur Park.
La Fonda.
And
can I share a TMI?
Of course.
About La Fonda?
Yeah.
Totally TMI. When I told my mom, like, oh, I found this spot, La Fonda in MacArthur Park, I really want to take you guys. They have mariachi Sunday brunch or whatever. And she was like, we went there for your dad's birthday one time, and then you came along.
What?
Yeah, and
That's
I was like,
cute.
I don't need to know that I was
That's
conceived
cute.
after
It was
a dinner
It
at La
was
Fonda.
Amor Eterno, or maybe something that the mariachis played.
Like, thanks, Mom.
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's cute.
So I was working in MacArthur Park through the Levitt Pavilion, which
That's
is
right.
the
You did
organization
Levitt
that does like
Pavilion
free
too.
concerts in the park. And that's where I got connected through a friend, Miguel Ramos, to the work of City of Lights. And then it came around to how we met.
And so City of Lights is, or was, it's evolved. But so it's a nonprofit that advocates for.
So the City of Lights at the time was had been a program of the LA County Bicycle Coalition. And
LA County Bicycle Coalition.
Which was a bike advocacy organization. The program itself broke off and really wanted to focus on how to advocate for people of color generally who get around without a car. And that then ultimately evolved into Multicultural Communities for Mobility, becoming its own organization. And more recently, the most recent evolution is People for Mobility Justice.
Yeah, and they do some pretty awesome work for us bike riders and us train riders and us bus riders
and walkers,
pedestrians. I mean, I thought I remember hearing people saying, "What are those stupid, ugly things they put on Cesar Chavez?" It's like, so people like you don't die. That area used to be the most accidents or the most deaths even, I think. Cesar Chavez. And they put those little barriers up so that people wouldn't get hit in the corners. And so
it's incredible what those like slight shifts will do, as like irritating or inconvenient as they might seem.
So advocating, always out for the people, always you've always been doing some really interesting work and obviously you care a lot about the neighborhood, and then you ended up at Self-Help Graphics.
I did, I had a pit stop at the Music Center, and then
oh, that's right, you did? Oh, I didn't know that.
I did.
What did you do there?
I was in the programming department of like the Music Center proper.
We did talk about this before.
So I was there for a couple of years.
Wow. And so you ended up at Self-Help Graphics, and you've been there how long now?
7.5 years.
7.5 years.
So time
how's that been for you? Tell us about the ups and the downs.
Oh man. I think so. I'll back it up a little bit more to some of the work with now PMJ in advocating for cyclist rights. We would back then run into this notion of, who are bike lanes really for? Like, why are you advocating for bike lanes if that just means gentrification? And so it was always this sort of process of like, well, actually, like, here are the numbers. Here are the stats of the number of people of color who ride their bikes because they have to, because they can't afford a car or whatever, for any number of reasons. And so to then come to self-help and sort of have a parallel conversation was an interesting experience. But I think my time there has been eventful, to say the least. But it's a very powerful experience. I think I feel very fortunate that I got to come in after Yvonne, because Yvonne really, she lifted that place up from a really challenging moment. And I got to come in with essentially the same size team that she's had started with. Actually, no, because when she started, it was just her. But I think to sort of carry the baton on work to buy the building, which was work that had started before I had gotten there. 4 years of work to get the city to sell the building to Self-Help directly, and then ongoing fundraising to own the building outright by paying off the mortgage, which we're so close to right now.
Exciting.
And then ultimately the renovation of the building. And I think for all of that to sort of coincide as we're coming up on 2023 with the 50th anniversary of the organization, I just feel like I'm in the right place at the right time.
50 years.
Yeah.
Wow. And you were there at the 40th?
I was not. I was there for the 45th.
45th, okay. 45th and on. And where do you see it going now with Self-Help Graphics?
I think it's a sort of interesting crux point in terms of, hitting 50. And a lot of the organizations of that time that Self-Help came up with don't exist anymore. They didn't make it for a number of reasons, including chronic and systemic undercapitalization. But I think there's what I find really interesting about Self-Help, and what I hope moving forward it really lands on is always having a sort of deep sense of that history, and understanding here are all of the very different people that have come through these doors and have contributed to this sort of collective visual archive and documentation of the Chicano community and beyond, because we've had folks from all backgrounds. But so to always sort of have a grounding in that, while as the organization evolves and grows and is responsive to the community's current needs, that's not ever lost or erased. And I think that's hard, because when you have a 50-year-old organization, there's so many stories. I still, to this day, people walk in randomly and are like, oh, I'm so-and-so, and I was here in 90 whatever, and we did this back then, or I was the teaching artist for this program. And so, and I'm always like, oh my God, I have to collect and capture this info so that it's not lost again. I think that's the hard part about a place with such a long legacy that hasn't always had the resources that it's needed.
Yeah.
So
I think it's Self-Help Graphics is at a place where it's grown so much, and so it's really difficult to I imagine, because I don't know exactly, but it must be really difficult to for people to try to imagine it how it was when it first started, and in these little places, and with friends and family running it, and you could come in anytime, and but it's grown to a place, and the people that started it, there is no way they could still be there,
right.
There is no way that the same people could be gatekeepers, or I don't know what the word is for that, but the people that run the space. And so Self-Help Graphics had to evolve naturally, right, into something different, into something that it is what it is now, and it still has the neighborhood feel for people that come in. People can still walk in, people can still do workshops and learn how to actually make prints, and all these things can still happen, but it actually has something that I didn't have before, which is a structure that helps it grow and helps it stay strong, right, and helps it to continue to do what it does in bigger forms, etc., I imagine. So with that, how could maybe communities or people start new things that still have, I think maybe there needs to be more little grassroots kind of tiny things that can still start in a garage. Somebody needs to start something in a garage, or maybe there's a way to do something like that, and start some kind of a grant program for that. But it's so hard for people to see the trajectory and everything that it's been through and where it's going, and all that. But it would be nice for just a little neighborhood spot to open up again, and
absolutely.
and do little things like that, and maybe Self-Help could start a grant program for that.
Add that to the list of things that we do. I think, well, I wouldn't say it didn't have a structure. I think it's an organization that like went through a pretty intense like financial trauma, which then it turns into like they had 15 staff and had to go down to 1 or at some point 0. And then you have somebody like Yvonne be like that person who's going to come in and navigate and figure things out. So it's definitely had its ebbs and flows. But I was just talking about this recently. Like, I don't think self-help should be the only place in the neighborhood. Exactly, and we've carried that flag just because in some senses it's been true at some points in time. But it really shouldn't. It shouldn't be the only anchor. And
the neighborhoods are so big; it's impossible to just have one.
And you have places like Espacio up the street that is its own sort of hub as well, and working with artists in a different way. And I think there's a need for all kinds of different sort of spaces and types of activities to pop up. I think the hard part about creating like a larger organization that can then access all these like grant dollars and things is that it starts to, once you have that, then you need somebody who's going to run that. Yeah. It's going to run like that administrative side of it. And for an artist like with Sister Karen, like she had to just sort of give up her artistic practice. Doors, yeah. Be like, cool, I'm going to do this so that all these other artists can do that work. And I think that's the what I would put out there to folks is like, you don't have to become a nonprofit. And hopefully you can find other sort of business models to support the work without taking on ultimately like having to become a professional administrator, which is the work that I do. And I love the work that I do because I'm not an artist, and I want to be that person who's creating the space and bringing in the resources for that to be done.
That's something really difficult to be that good at writing grants, I guess, right?
I mean, that's one part of it, and it's just a lot of relationship building. And I think something that
I just want to say this real quick because this is something that like I didn't know when I was younger, like how important it is to know how to write grants or things like that.
How to write at all.
Or how to write at all, yeah. I mean, and writing grants, if you're a young artist, if you're if you're out there and you're 18, whatever, and you're like, I want to be an artist one day, of course, perfect your craft and work on your craft, but also start reading a lot about grants and writing grants and go to workshops. There's a ton of workshops that the Cultural Affairs Department puts out, and
or the Center for Cultural Innovation.
Yeah, just look for something out there as far as writing grants, or even just Google it and start to understand that process. And you could even start to apply for grants and learn to be denied, because you will be denied a bunch of times. But if that's what you want to do, you should definitely start like reading about grants.
I think it's really just learning how to tell your story. Yeah. And unfortunately, sometimes it's learning how to tell your story to somebody who will not know how to receive you because they're so disconnected from the culture. And often it's those folks who are in those positions and in grant making, although there's more people of color in that space now. But it's just like how do you communicate the value of your work and what you're contributing or working on in such a way that somebody will get it quickly. And you kind of start to learn that when you like do college applications, for example, because you got to stand out amongst like thousands of people. So I think yes, if that's of interest, learn to look, how to write grants, but it's really just communicating who you are to somebody who's like, dropping in from outer space.
Yeah. So that is also difficult, learning to write about yourself.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. That can be hard.
Because I didn't come into this art grants and all that until I'm 50 now, but until I was 40 or after 40. I started doing the photography thing at 40 and then started writing grants like at 42, 43. And I had no idea. It was just really difficult.
Yeah,
So
it is hard.
if you're young and you want to do some art stuff, I just want to say that again. Start learning
Or
about
have
grant
like
writing.
an art buddy who can write about you.
Yeah, I've also had friends write for me too,
Yeah.
but it's hard to always ask people to help you. So it's good to know it yourself and to know how to do that. So yeah. Well, that's that. I want to get into a little bit about El Día de los Muertos, which is I mean it's a cultural big to do every year now. And then self-help graphics has been another thing that you guys hold torch now, but there's a lot more people doing that now. And where do you see like it's a silly question, of course, but speak about whatever you want, but how do you see self-help graphics and Day of the Dead working together in the future, or evolving, or just where is it going?
Yeah, for sure. Something that Andy Bernal had told me was that the artist community always knew that at some point it was going to blow up. Mm-hmm. It would just become huge. Like, this wasn't this thing that we could hide on the East Side forever. And like, just for those folks in the know. And obviously, you have things like the Book of Life and Coco, and as it has gotten bigger, it's really interesting to hear from folks about like the tradition at self-help graphics. I've looked at flyers from like the 70s and the 80s, and this is just one example of like the sort of perception of us as stewards of the tradition, self-help graphics. We got a lot of shit because we didn't hold it this past year on November 2nd. Like I think it was a Tuesday. It might have been a Tuesday or Wednesday. And so I have to explain to people, like, we have done it during the week on November 2nd, whatever day it lands. And that is way too much money and like people hours of labor to spend on an experience that not that many people are going to be able to come out to.
People don't show up.
People do come, but not at the same level as if it's like on a Saturday night or even on a Friday night. It can be hard because people are still coming after work. And it's interesting because I've had to explain to people, well, actually, like, Sister Karen was doing it on whatever Saturday was closest because she knew what was up. She was trying to keep it accessible. And so, yeah, I've definitely had more recently, like, folks who are, purists, and it's always been done this way. And I'm like, really though? Has it? Let me take you to the archives. But so, like, and that's like our journey. That's one of the elements of our journey at self-help graphics. But I think the other is, and we're actually talking about this now, is how do you steward the tradition at self-help graphics? Because it's a very specific version of Day of the Dead. And be a steward of that on behalf of LA in a way that doesn't bend to capitalism and these like economic opportunities that are now popping up around Day of the Dead. And so we have to walk a very fine line between self-help being a bridge for artists to receive the money that's out there on this tradition that this community has held. So it's like, how do we allow for that and create those opportunities while not just becoming like set designers? And that's a hard thing, because it's like, well, why shouldn't our community benefit financially from this thing that they've created?
I was thinking about that the other day, how there's when a big corporation comes in and offers something to the community or brings something in, and it's not somebody from the community, the people in the community are like, what the hell? Why isn't there somebody from the community in here?
Right.
And then another corporation comes, they hire somebody from the community, and then people are like, hey, sell out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really difficult.
Hard.
I've done some things where I'm like, God, I hope I don't get, hung. But at the same time, I need a paycheck. I need to pay my rent. And it's really hard to pay my rent. Venmo at Rafa-LA. So it's, it's a tricky line to walk on. And we have to walk on it, being those people that are being offered these.
Yeah. Right.
So I mean,
like, do I say no to that and like have this opportunity maybe go to an artist who's not of the community, or who is literally a set designer, because that we've seen that too. So that's something we're navigating. I think the other thing now is also just being really careful about how we're partnering with other, not even like corporate America, but like other nonprofit organizations and the sort of like, you know, current interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and like how do we make sure that we're not just like checking somebody's box for them, and like, oh, well, we partner with Self-Help Graphics, and look at this photo of the altar that they did for us, and so we're starting to see that too. And so I think for us, there's for the organization, there's a lot to walk through in terms of like, how do you create terms of engagement of like, cool, you want to work with us, this is what that looks like. And there's no,
and you can do that.
Yeah,
I mean, I've done that too, where it's like, okay, I will work with you, but I also have like certain rules, and I don't want to be this, and I don't want to be that. And they need you.
Yeah,
they
totally.
need you. So
totally. And I mean, I think we're at this point of having that conversation with the artists that put on Day of the Dead with us and help us, and defining that in such a way that like it might hurt a little bit to say no to some opportunities, but ultimately it is the best thing to like really just set firm boundaries.
Yeah. And being being an organization that recently received large amounts of money from the city and from other grants,
from the state,
for the building and for other things, like I don't know, I mean, how to say this, but like how are these grants, I mean, it's public information, you guys got what, like 5 million?
We got 4 million from the state of California, and 1 million from Mackenzie Scott,
Basil's ex-wife.
Yeah.
So you got these $5 million. Do those grants, are there guidelines that you have to follow? Like, are they specifically for certain things, or do you get to say party with all this, and you know, or how does that work?
It depends. With the state, it's very strict. Like they want to know, you know, exactly what the last dollar is being spent on, which I think is fair because it's public money. And then with private donors, it depends. They can be like, we want this for, you know, this program, or we want this for the capital campaign, or like, you decide, here's the money. We like what you do, go for it. Yeah. Oh, those are my favorite, love it. And so, that's a big chunk of the work that I navigate, is like jigsawing together this like puzzle of the self-help annual operating budget.
And I, just because you said that, and like, you know, that you navigate this, I do want to give a quick shout out to your staff.
Hell yes.
Because you have some badass people working for you. And so it's not, you know.
No. Yeah, this is definitely not a one person situation. And even impossible with my current staff. So like Marbella at the helm of the artistic programming and education, Dewey as our master printer, who's like our veterano.
Your in-house homeboy.
Yeah. Yeah, Nancy, Madison, Natalie, Lulu, Stephanie, and like a huge part of like my messaging out into the world and into the universe has been like, we do so much, but we need more help. We still need more help. And as the staff grows, I'm like, no, we need more. We still need more. And so, there's no way that we could do this alone. And even as a staff with the teaching artists, that's like another 20 people. With the artists that come in to help with things like Day of the Dead, that's another dozen people. Like it's not this is a truly community created experience. Yeah.
So with the money from the state, is there like already plans for what you're going to do with it, or is there something you can share with us?
Yeah. So that full $5 million is going to support the renovation of the building. Okay. So Self-Help Graphics is in the Ocean Queen, former fish packing plant. And that was something that we talked a lot about too, in terms of designs. Like, we don't want to create something that's going to be alienating or where people are going to be like, who's that for? That's not for us. So it's a humble project in the sense that we're working with the building that we have. We're not starting from scratch. It's a gorgeous building too. It's a cool building. Needs a lot of work.
It's an old cannery, fish cannery.
So yeah, we're really, I think, concerned with making sure that whatever dollars are coming to Self-Help Graphics have some sort of impact out in the community.
So I think, I mean, the point to make, or not the point to make, but I think it's important to make a point of how important it is to have your actual own building now, because I think Self-Help Graphics could have almost fallen apart when they lost the last building, right? So it's really important now to actually own the building, and I mean, what you're doing is important. It's not just like, hey, we want to look pretty.
Yeah, no,
has nothing to do with that.
No, I mean, even in that old building, I think there was always the issue of the leaky roof, right? Like, and I mean, we're not into that now still. So yeah, the ability to move forward and not worry about being pushed out or priced out, that's incredible.
That's true. And
and even just like, I mean, this is getting like more down into that like financial path, but like ownership and like the equity that comes with owning your own spot, and like the access that opens up to other resources. And that's not a luxury that this organization has been afforded before.
And also having all of the old prints and finally being able to have a place to store them. Right?
Yeah, climate controlled, high density print storage. So I'm super excited about that.
That's exciting. That's cool.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I think something I've talked to people about, I'm like, it's kind of bullshit that people come and like, they come to these programs, they love the organization, they love the work that we do, but like if it's summertime, like they're sweating buckets in the building. If it's winter, there are times where you can see your own breath. So I'm like, the base level of quality experience that we want our community to have, we can't have right now. And that's a huge thing on the building. Yeah,
it's a giant block of cement.
Just bricks. Yeah. Former refrigerator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, I mean, your trajectory has been, little neighborhood girl to El Sereno to Bravo to Pitzer. I always find that name weird, Pitzer.
That is a little funny.
And then you have been working in all these nonprofits, and do you see where do you see Betty Avila in 10 years? Have you been asked this? I mean, that's a funny question to ask. Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I always hate that question.
I ask myself that question, I think. I mean, the time will come, right, when I need to move out of the way so that the next leader can step in at Self-Help. And I think about Sister Karen a lot because she was there for 25 years. And, like, she worked until the day she died. And so I'm like, that's a different generation. It's not going to be me. So... and I think that's the nature of the work in nonprofits is like you right now as it stands with the nonprofit industrial complex, like it is built to burn you out. It's built to like extract all of the productivity from you and like all the good stuff and like take advantage of your passion, and then you get burned out and they just go to the next person who's like who they can freshly squeeze. And I think for me to be in this position now at Self-Help, I feel really grateful. I can start to shift the paradigm. Obviously, we're still functioning within the NPIC, but to hopefully just create a different type of culture and understanding of the work, right? Like that martyrdom is not what we're looking for. Is something I hope I can leave the organization with when the time comes. But I think I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years. I really don't. Yeah. I think art and culture is always going to be part of my life in some way, shape, or form. I think like what I would love. Dream job. Win the lottery.
That's not a job. Okay.
But like spend the rest of my life giving that money away to organizations that I'm aligned with, doing the work.
So maybe working for a big foundation that
and living the life like on board. So I'm still working because I'm on a board and supporting organizations that way, but like traveling the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're like, cool. My check is in the mail.
While
I'm over
traveling.
here in like, Dubai or whatever.
Yeah. You want to be the woman who writes the checks and says, "Oh, thank you. Oh, we really appreciate what you're doing."
Which I know is like totally
Here's your
ridiculous, but super, dream world. I know people like that.
Yeah. Definitely.
I know people who live that life, and it's wonderful. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what my role will be.
Well, whatever it is, I'm sure that it's going to be something that draws you for good reasons and like pulls you towards it too. And,
Yeah.
And
it'll be a values aligned situation for sure. Yeah.
So we have a question that we ask everybody that comes to this show, and when we're winding down to the end, is there anything? Well, no, we'll get to that after. So, we ask everybody, what you do. It comes from a magical place. It comes from somewhere that not many people can do the things that you do. So we like to ask our guests, Betty Avila, how do you do it?
Do it hardcore.
Punk rock Betty in here, hardcore. All right.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to mention? Anybody else you want to thank or?
I just want to give a shout out to my partner Paulo because he definitely is very generous in sharing sort of my limited time with my work and the art world that I love so much. So, and shout out to baby Bowie, my fur baby.
All right. And with that said, I want to say thank you to you.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your time and for giving us your presence.
Of course.
And thank you guys for listening. We'll see you next week.